He sat across from me, arms crossed, with this little smirk on his face like he already knew how this was going to go. And honestly, he was right. He did know how it was going to go. He just had no idea which direction. I walked into that building with 15 years of experience, a track record most people in that room could only dream about, and a suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. And this kid, this 20-something-year-old with a title he clearly hadn't earned yet, looked me up and down and said, and I quote, "I'm not sure you're really what we're looking for. We need someone more current." More current. I sat there. I smiled. I said thank you for your time. And I walked out of that building completely calm. Because I already knew something he didn't. And by Monday morning, everything he thought he had built for himself was gone. If you've ever been underestimated, talked down to, or made to feel like you were less than what you actually are, stick with me. Because this story is going to hit different for you. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because we tell real stories on this channel. Stories about power, about patience, and about what happens when people finally stop underestimating the wrong person. Drop a like too. It genuinely helps this channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because none of this started in that interview room. It started about 8 months earlier when I found myself at what I can only describe as the lowest point of my professional life. I had just left a company I helped build from the ground up. 12 years. 12 years of late nights, missed holidays, skipped vacations, and deals closed under pressure that would have made most people quit. And then one day, after a merger that I had absolutely no say in, I was handed a box, a handshake, and a "we'll be in touch." They were never in touch. So there I was, mid-40s. More experienced than most people twice my age. And somehow starting over. Now, I want to be real with you here because a lot of people tell these stories and they skip the part where it actually hurt. So I'm not going to do that. It hurt. It really did. I remember sitting in my home office, which now felt more like a holding cell than a workspace, and just staring at my laptop screen for like 20 minutes without typing a single word. I had a resume open. I had LinkedIn open. I had 3 different job boards open in different tabs. And I just sat there. Because when you've been at the top or close to it for a long time, there's this weird thing that happens when you have to start selling yourself again. It feels almost embarrassing. Like you're going backwards. Like something went wrong. And in my head, something had gone wrong. I just didn't fully understand what yet. I updated my resume. I reached out to old contacts. I started applying. And for the first couple of months, it actually wasn't that bad. I was getting responses. I was getting interviews. I had conversations with some solid companies, a few of which I was genuinely excited about. But then something started happening that I hadn't experienced before. I started getting screened by people who were younger than me. Way younger. And I don't mean that as a dig at young people. Some of the sharpest people I've ever worked with have been in their 20s. Age has nothing to do with ability, and I've always believed that. But what I started noticing was something different. It wasn't just that they were young. It was the attitude. There was this pattern in some of these interviews, not all of them but enough, where I could feel myself being quietly dismissed before I even finished my sentences. Like the decision had already been made and the interview was just a formality. A box to check. I'd answer a question and see them glance at their notes with this expression that said, "Okay, sure, whatever." I'd mention a specific achievement and watch them nod with zero reaction like they hadn't processed a single word. I'd ask thoughtful questions at the end and get one-word answers. It was subtle. But I'd spent enough years in rooms with enough different kinds of people to know when someone wasn't taking me seriously. And I told myself to shake it off, to keep going. Because that's what you do. So I kept applying. And eventually, I got an interview at a company that, on paper, looked like a really solid fit. The company was a mid-sized firm in the marketing and brand strategy space. They were growing fast, had a solid client list, and were looking for a senior director of brand partnerships, which was essentially exactly what I had been doing just under a different title for the better part of a decade. I did my research. I really did my research. I looked into their biggest clients, their recent campaigns, their growth trajectory, who their competitors were, and where I thought they had gaps that someone with my background could genuinely fill. I came in prepared. I came in sharp. And I came in with a portfolio that I had rebuilt from scratch specifically for this interview. The first part of the interview went well. I met with HR, had a good conversation, felt the energy in the room shift in a positive direction. They walked me down the hall and told me the next part of the interview would be with the head of the department I'd be joining. I straightened my jacket, took a breath, walked in, and there he was. Now before I keep going, if you're not subscribed yet, do it right now. Seriously. This is the kind of story that gets better as it goes, and I don't want you to miss the next part. Subscribe, drop a comment below telling me if you've ever been underestimated in a professional setting, and let me know, because I read every single one. Your interaction on this video genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this one. So I walk in and the guy is sitting there at this big conference table, laptop open, barely looking up when I come through the door. He was young. I'd say late 20s, maybe just barely 30. He had that kind of energy that some people get when they've been promoted faster than they've been tested, confident in a way that hasn't been challenged yet. The kind of confidence that looks a lot like arrogance until life gets around to teaching the difference. He gestured at the chair across from him without making eye contact. So I sat down. He closed his laptop, slowly like he was doing me a favor, leaned back in his chair and looked at me for the first time. And I saw it immediately. That look. That flicker of something behind his eyes that lasted maybe half a second before he covered it with a professional expression. He had already decided. I don't know if it was my age. I don't know if it was something on my resume. I don't know if he was just having a bad day and I happened to be the next person through the door. But whatever the reason, I felt the energy in that room shift in a direction I recognized. He opened the interview by asking me to walk him through my background. Standard question. I started talking. He started scrolling on his phone. Not subtly, just scrolling. Right there on the table, screen up, thumb moving. I kept talking. Because I'm a professional, and that's what professionals do. I finished my overview. He looked up. He asked a question about a specific campaign trend that had been relevant in the industry for about the last 18 months. I answered it in detail. He nodded slowly with this expression like he was a professor listening to a student give an average answer. Then he asked me something that I've thought about almost every day since. He said, "No offense, but do you think your experience is actually relevant here? A lot of what you've done feels pretty traditional. We move fast. We think differently. I just want to make sure you're not going to slow us down. No offense. I want you to really sit with that for a second. I want you to imagine 15 years of work. 15 years of results. Deals closed. Brands built. Teams led. And then imagine a 30-year-old with a middle management title looking across a table at you and asking, casually, if you might be too slow for him." I took a breath. I looked him directly in the eye. And I said very calmly, "That's a fair question. I think the answer will be pretty clear once you see what I've actually built. But I respect that you want someone who fits your pace." He nodded, wrote something down, didn't ask a follow-up. The interview lasted 11 more minutes. I counted. When it was over, he stood up, gave me a handshake that felt like an afterthought and said, "We'll be in touch." I walked out, got in my car, and I sat there in the parking garage for probably 5 minutes just processing what had happened. And then something shifted in me. Not anger, not embarrassment, something quieter than both of those things. There was clarity. Before we keep going, if this story is hitting home for you, drop a comment right now and tell me about a time someone underestimated you. I read every single comment on this channel, every one. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button so you don't miss how this ends. Because trust me, the ending is the part people don't see coming. I drove home that day thinking about one specific thing. Not him. Not the interview. Not the way he scrolled his phone while I was talking or the way he said, "No offense," before saying something that was completely offensive. I was thinking about the company itself. Because here's the thing about doing your research before a job interview. Sometimes you walk away knowing more about a business than the people running it. And I had done a lot of research on this company. A lot. And what I found when I was preparing for that interview was interesting. Not alarming. Not obvious. But interesting. The company was growing fast on the surface. Their client list looked impressive. Their social presence was polished. From the outside, everything looked clean. But when I started digging into the actual numbers, revenue trends, client retention rates, the turnover they'd had in senior positions over the last 2 years, a different picture started to form. One that looked a lot less stable than the highlight reel they put out publicly. I hadn't thought much of it before the interview. I was just doing due diligence. Being thorough. That's just how I operate. But sitting in that parking garage, engine off, the quiet of the garage around me, I started thinking about those numbers differently. And then I started thinking about something else. About 6 weeks before that interview, I had a conversation with an old colleague of mine. Guy named Richard. We'd worked together years back, stayed in touch the way people do when they actually respect each other. He'd reached out because he was putting together a small investment group, a handful of people with serious industry experience looking to acquire undervalued companies in the media and marketing space. He asked if I'd be interested in joining. I told him I'd think about it. I was still in the middle of my job search at that point and wasn't sure I wanted to take on something that big while everything else was still in the air. But sitting in that parking garage thinking about what I'd just been through, and thinking about what I knew about that company, I pulled out my phone and texted Richard. 3 words. I'm in. Call me. He called me that same night. And for about 2 hours we talked through everything. The group he'd put together was solid. 4 people total, including the 2 of us. All of them with real backgrounds, real track records, and real capital. They weren't playing around. I walked them through what I knew about the company. The surface-level growth that didn't quite match up with the underlying numbers. The high turnover in leadership. The client relationships that looked strong publicly but had some cracks if you knew where to look. Richard was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "How soon can you put together a full breakdown?" I said, "Give me 72 hours. I want to tell you that I did it out of some calm, strategic, long-term mindset. But honestly, part of what drove me to my desk that night and kept me there until almost 2 in the morning was just pure, clean motivation. The kind you get when someone makes you feel like you're not good enough. I've heard people say that anger is bad fuel, that it burns out too fast, that you should only operate from a place of peace and logic. Maybe. But that night it worked just fine. I pulled together everything. Market positioning, revenue patterns, client concentration risk, which was actually a significant issue once I laid it all out. They were heavily dependent on 3 major clients, and if even one of those relationships shifted, the whole picture changed dramatically. Staff structure, leadership gaps, and the opportunity, what this company could actually become under the right direction with the right people making decisions. 72 hours later, I sent Richard a 40-page document. His response was 4 words. Let's make a move. Now here's where I need to slow down a little because I want to be honest with you about something. The next few weeks were not some smooth, cinematic montage of power moves and handshakes. It was work. Real, grinding, detailed work. Due diligence processes. Legal reviews. Valuation discussions. Back and forth conversations that sometimes went nowhere and had to be restarted from scratch. There were moments where I genuinely wasn't sure it was going to happen. Moments where one of the other guys in the group got cold feet about the numbers. Moments where the timing felt wrong. Moments where I sat back and thought, maybe I'm doing this for the wrong reasons. Maybe I'm letting one bad interview push me into a decision I'm not fully ready for. And I had to be honest with myself about that. Because there's a difference between making a smart move and making a reactive move. And I needed to know which one this was. So I took a weekend. No calls. No spreadsheets. No strategy. I just let myself think clearly without all the noise. And when I came back to it on Monday, I realized something important. This wasn't just about him. This was never just about him. The opportunity was real. The numbers made sense. The timing, as uncomfortable as it was actually quite good. The company was at a point where the right outside investment and leadership shift could genuinely turn it into something much bigger than it currently was. The fact that I had a personal reason for being in the room didn't make the business case any weaker. If anything, it made me more focused. So I got back on the phone with Richard and I said, let's close this. The acquisition process took about 5 weeks from that point. 5 weeks of careful, quiet maneuvering. The kind of thing that happens in the background while the people inside a company go about their normal days completely unaware. And that's the part that gets me every time I think about it. While all of this was happening, while I was in rooms with lawyers and investors and doing calls at 6 in the morning, that guy was sitting in his office. Running his department. Probably interviewing other candidates. Probably dismissing other people the same way he dismissed me. Going through his week like everything was completely normal. Because for him it was. He had no idea. None. There's something almost cinematic about that if you think about it long enough. 2 completely different realities existing at the same time. Him in his office, doing whatever it is he did on a Tuesday afternoon. Me on a conference call, signing documents. Same company. Very different futures. The deal closed on a Friday. I remember the exact moment it became official because I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone completely cold and I looked at the final confirmation email and just exhaled. Not celebration. Not triumph. Just exhale. Like something that had been sitting on my chest for months had finally lifted. I texted Richard. He sent back a single emoji. That was it. That was the whole celebration. And then I started thinking about Monday. Because here's the thing about acquiring a company, the first Monday matters a lot. The way you show up. The message it sends. The tone it sets for everything that comes after. I thought carefully about how I wanted to handle it. I'm not someone who leads with drama. I don't need a scene. I don't need to make a point loudly. I just needed to make a decision. And the decision I made was this. I was going to restructure leadership. I was going to bring in people I trusted. And I was going to start by evaluating every department head, their performance, and whether their team was actually contributing to where this company needed to go. That's just good business. That's what any serious new owner does. The fact that one of those department heads happened to be the guy who had dismissed me 6 weeks earlier, the guy who scrolled his phone while I talked, who asked me if I might be too slow for his team, who gave me an 11-minute interview and an afterthought handshake. That was just how it worked out. I called a Monday morning meeting for all department heads. I walked into that building wearing the same suit I'd worn to the interview. On purpose. I stood at the head of the table. And I watched the door open as each person came in. And when he walked through that door and saw me standing there, really saw me, registered who I was and where I was standing, I watched his face do something I will never forget for as long as I live. It wasn't dramatic. There was no outburst. No scene. It was just this slow, quiet moment of understanding. Like watching someone put together a puzzle in real time, piece by piece, until the whole picture clicks into place. He sat down. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. Not yet. I just looked around the table, made eye contact with each person in the room and said, "Good morning. I'm sure some of you have questions. Let's talk. Hey, real quick before we finish this, if this story has been keeping you locked in, drop a comment right now and tell me what you would have done in my position. Would you have walked away? Would you have done exactly what I did? I genuinely want to know. And if you're still not subscribed, you're literally one click away from never missing a story like this again. Hit that button. Now let's finish this." The room was quiet in that specific way that rooms get quiet when everyone in them knows something big is happening but nobody wants to be the first one to react. I've been in a lot of rooms in my life. Boardrooms, negotiation rooms, rooms where deals were made and rooms where they fell apart. And I've learned that the first 30 seconds of silence in a room like that tells you everything you need to know about the people in it. Some of them were looking at me directly. Curious. Trying to figure out who I was and what this meant for them. Those were the ones I made a mental note of immediately, because people who can hold eye contact in uncertain situations are usually the ones worth keeping. Some of them were looking at their phones or their notebooks. Avoiding. Waiting for someone else to set the tone first. And one of them was looking at the table. I introduced myself. Kept it short. I told them who I was, that the ownership of the company had changed as of Friday, and that I was there to talk about the path forward. No big speech. No power move energy. Just clarity. And then I opened it up for questions. A few people asked smart things. About job security, about the vision for the company, about what changes were coming and on what timeline. Good questions. Honest questions. The kind that tell you someone actually cares about the work, not just the politics. He didn't ask anything. He just sat there, completely still, with an expression I can only describe as controlled. Like someone who had decided that the safest thing to do right now was absolutely nothing. Which honestly, was probably the smartest decision he'd made in a while. The meeting lasted about 40 minutes. When it ended, I asked everyone to give me one-on-ones over the next 2 days. Department by department. I wanted to understand what each team was actually working on, what was going well, and where the real problems were. Not because I needed to perform a process. Because I actually needed to know. I wasn't there to blow the place up. I was there to build something real with what was already there, or at least what was worth keeping. His one-on-one was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. And I want to be honest with you again here because this is the part of the story where it would be really easy to make it into something it wasn't. The truth is, I thought about that meeting a lot between Monday morning and Tuesday afternoon. I thought about what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, what it was going to feel like to sit across from him again, but this time, on completely different terms. And somewhere in all of that thinking, I realized something about myself that I wasn't entirely expecting. I wasn't angry anymore. Like genuinely. The thing that had been sitting in my chest since I walked out of that parking garage, that quiet, motivating burn, it wasn't there the way it had been. Not because I'd forgotten what happened. Not because I was suddenly fine with the way he treated me. But because somewhere between the deal closing and that Monday morning, something had settled. I had nothing left to prove. Not to him. Not to anyone in that building. The outcome had already spoken. So when Tuesday afternoon came and he sat down across from me, this time on my side of the table in my building in a room I now owned, I didn't come in with a script. I didn't have a speech prepared. I didn't have a moment I was building toward. I just asked him to walk me through his department. And he did. And honestly, he knew his stuff. Technically, he was competent. His team had some real talent in it. The work they were doing wasn't bad. The The problem was never the work. I let him finish. And then I was quiet for a moment. And then I said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. He nodded. Do you remember interviewing me? About 6 weeks ago? The color shifted in his face. Not dramatically, but it shifted. He said, yes. I said, what do you remember about it? And he was quiet for what felt like a long time. Long enough that I could tell he was making a real decision about how honest to be. And then he said something I did not expect. He said, I don't think I gave you a fair shot. Just like that. No excuses attached to it. No, but I was just following our hiring criteria, or, it wasn't personal, or any of the things people say when they want to apologize without actually apologizing. Just, I don't think I gave you a fair shot. I looked at him for a second. And I said, no, you didn't. Another silence. Then I said, I'm going to be straight with you too. I'm restructuring leadership across the board. That's not personal, it's where this company needs to go. Some departments are going to look very different in 30 days. Yours is one of them. He nodded slowly. I could see him processing it. I continued, that doesn't automatically mean your role is gone. But it does mean everything is being evaluated from scratch. What you've built, what your team contributes, whether the structure makes sense going forward. All of it. He asked very quietly, is there anything I can do? And I told him the truth. I said, show me something I haven't seen yet. Now here's where I think a lot of people expect the story to go one way, and it kind of goes another. He didn't save his job. His department got restructured. A good portion of his team was absorbed into other divisions where their skills actually made more sense, and his specific role was eliminated in the reorganization. But I want to be clear about something. That decision was not revenge. I know that's what makes for a cleaner story. I know that's the version people want to hear, where the dismissive interviewer gets fired by the person he dismissed, and justice is served with a bow on it. But that's not really how it went. The restructuring happened because the department, as it was built, genuinely wasn't working the way the company needed it to. 3 people on his team got moved into roles that were actually better fits for them and better for the business. 2 were let go because their positions simply didn't exist in the new structure. And his specific director role was consolidated into a broader position that someone else, with a different kind of experience, was better suited to lead. The business decision and the personal history just happened to land in the same place. And I've thought about whether that's a coincidence or not. Whether, if there had been no interview, no parking garage moment, no late nights with spreadsheets, whether the outcome for his department would have been different. Honestly, I don't think it would have been. The numbers were the numbers. The structure was the structure. The decision would have been the same. But I'll also be honest enough to say that I didn't lose sleep over it the way I might have if it had been someone else. That was about 2 years ago now. The company is in a completely different place today. Revenue is up significantly. We brought in 2 clients in the first 6 months that the previous leadership had been chasing for over a year. The teams that stayed are actually performing. The culture feels different, less political, more focused. And me? I wake up every morning and go to work at a company that I own, that I helped build into something better. That exists, in part, because someone sat across a table from me and made me feel like I had nothing left to offer. I don't know where he is now. I genuinely hope he landed somewhere that fits him better. I hope the experience taught him something about the way he treats people. Not because I needed to, but because that's actually a better outcome for everyone. People who learn those lessons go on to lead better. And the world needs more people who lead better. But here's the thing I really want you to take from this story. It's not about revenge. It's not even really about him. It's about what you do with the moment when someone tells you, directly or indirectly, that you're not enough. Because that moment is a test. And most people fail it not because they're not capable, but because they let it shrink them. They internalize it. They start to believe it just a little bit. They get quieter. They aim lower. They talk themselves out of the next big move because some version of that voice is still in their head. And I get it. I really do. Because I felt that pull too. I sat in that parking garage and I felt it. But somewhere in that silence I made a different choice. I decided to let it sharpen me instead of shrink me. And that one decision changed everything. So if you're sitting somewhere right now and someone has made you feel like you're not current enough, not experienced enough, not young enough, not whatever enough, I need you to hear this. The people who underestimate you are not seeing the full picture. They're seeing a snapshot, a resume, a first impression filtered through whatever bias they walked into the room with. You are not a snapshot. And sometimes the best thing you can do is walk out of that room, get in your car, sit in the quiet for a minute, and then go build something they'll have to reckon with. That's it. That's the whole lesson. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to this channel right now, because this is exactly the kind of content we put out here, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next.